You're watching HTV. Now we join the ITN News.
Good evening, this is the news and sport from ITN. Tonight's headlines: America's storm of the century claims up to 50 lives. AIDS doctor worked in Bolton when he knew he was ill. John Burt gets public support from top BBC managers.
And tonight's main sports headline: Steve Staunton's goal keeps Villa and United together at the top of the Premier League.
Up to 50 people have died in America's worst storm this century. A state of emergency has been declared along the entire East Coast. The storm began in Florida, where tornadoes claimed nearly half the dead, and then swept north to New York and Maine.
It's America's storm of the century, a hurricane with snow that has engulfed the Atlantic coast, leaving dozens dead, millions without electricity, and most stunned. In some southern towns, it's the first snowfall in decades. It began off Florida, spawning more than 50 tornadoes and crushing homes. A woman died in this house. She'd lost her last home 6 months ago to Hurricane Andrew. 18 people were killed in Florida alone.
This is worse than the war I was in. It was unbelievable.
Along 600 miles of coastline, seawalls fell and the curious fled. Thousands were forced to evacuate their homes as streets flooded. Some fishing crews had ignored the storm warnings. Many at sea had to be rescued. This man's companion drowned. The driving snow that pounded a dozen states overnight has paralyzed many cities, with major roads and airports closed. New York looks like a ghost town. The 70-mile-an-hour winds shattering skyscraper windows on Fifth Avenue.
With the devastation that this thing has wrought, I really probably think it is the storm of the century.
The damage is enormous. In northerly states, it's the worst blizzard since 1888. In the south, some were caught unprepared on their way to the beach. Trapped cars, blocked roads, but for many, a chance to take advantage of nature's nastiest blow. Bill Neely, ITN, Washington.
Well, now we go live to Bill Neely in Washington. Bill, there were reports earlier that the storms might be heading in our direction. What's the latest information on that?
Yes, in fact, it was the director of the National Weather Service who said that. But in fact, the storm has now blown itself over America, over Canada, and is now skirting Iceland. So Britain seems to be safe for the moment.
Well, they're calling it the storm of the century, but is it really as bad as that?
Well, there have been bigger snowfalls and there have been higher wind speeds, but really it's the combination of these over such a wide area, over 12 states, that has caused this. Birmingham, Alabama, for example, has never had a snowplow, but it's now under 2 feet of snow. For many southern states, it's like snow in Corfu, wind chill in Atlanta of -15, winds of 100 miles an hour. Combine all this together and there you have it, it's the storm of the century.
Bill Neely, thank you very much. A doctor who died of an AIDS-related illness knew he was infected when he worked in a hospital's casualty department. Bolton Health Authority, which has opened a helpline for worried patients, say he breached guidelines by not telling the hospital involved.
The helpline was opened this morning to take calls from patients who believe they may have been treated by the doctor who died from AIDS. He's still not been named. The health authority is writing to 260 people recorded as his casualty patients when he worked as a locum doctor at the nearby Bolton Royal Infirmary. But there's no guarantee that people who've moved house since he stopped work there a year ago can definitely be traced. Health authority officials confirmed this morning that the doctor's colleagues in his GP practice in the town knew he had AIDS but didn't tell the authority.
It would not be a matter that the practice would discuss with the health authority. The health authority employed this doctor in good faith as a locum casualty officer on the 6 occasions I've mentioned.
AIDS tests will be available to worried patients after counselling, but officials accepted that the doctor did break health department guidelines. They refused to give any clues to his identity, despite acknowledging that to do so could allay the fears of patients of other doctors. It's now known that the doctor involved worked for several other health authorities before he came to Bolton. Officials here have been in contact with those areas, but they won't say where they are or when he practiced there. Jonathan Munro, ITN, in Bolton.
The BBC's top executives say they're standing by their Director General John Birt following the row over his former tax arrangements. In a letter to tomorrow's Times, the 10 current members of the Board of Management say they believe he's the best person to lead the BBC and he has their unanimous support. But one of them admitted earlier that Mr Birt and the BBC have been damaged by the affair.
John Birt was making the news again today, but not making any comment. There's been no sign of him at his South London home or at his country cottage in Wales. But there's been intense public speculation this weekend about his future. The disclosures about his former tax arrangements have led to some calls for his resignation. But in a letter in tomorrow's Times, senior BBC colleagues have rallied round, saying, "We, the 10 members of the Board of Management, believe that John Birt is the best person to lead the BBC and has our unanimous support," though they admit both Mr Birt and the BBC have been damaged by the row.
We'd all rather this hadn't happened, of course, but and we've got to try hard to work with staff to carry on the plans that we have in place and to rebuild. I think it is possible to rebuild, as I say, if John's got the support and the help of those around him, which he'll get.
John Birt may have the support of his senior managers, but whether he has the crucial backing of the BBC governors is another matter. They're due to meet Mr Birt on Thursday, and 2 of them told ITN today there remain a number of questions which are still to be answered. Simon Harris, ITN, West London.
The Chancellor has made it clear he intends to hold on to his job in any future cabinet reshuffle. Mr Lamont has been putting the finishing touches to Tuesday's budget, which many believe will determine whether he stays or goes.
Unusually breaking the pre-budget purdah, Mr Lamont has made it clear he won't be giving up his job without a fight. Much will depend on his budget. To tackle the £45 million budget deficit, he might consider tax increases and spending cuts. But those very measures could stifle the recovery. The opposition parties made clear their priorities.
I would like a budget that gave a new sense of national direction and purpose to deal with our fundamental economic problems. In particular, I would like a budget for jobs.
The key political and social priority is obviously the dole queues and tackling these dreadful dole queues. We want to see more money spent on construction, investing in infrastructure, getting people back to work that way, and a package of measures to help small business.
With heavy pressure for action on unemployment from his own side too, the Chancellor's options are limited.
What he can do, I think, is do nothing much to raise revenue this year, therefore allowing the economy to continue recovering, but announcing revenue increases over the medium term. And the litmus test for me will be how convincing his medium-term plan is for getting the budget deficit back down.
The Prime Minister, meeting his Italian counterpart today, won't be thinking about his reshuffle until the summer. But if the Chancellor can achieve the difficult balancing act required, Mr Major will find it much more difficult to sack him.
In Bosnia, talks have broken down over plans to set up an air corridor to allow emergency aid into the besieged town of Srebrenica. Today, a relief convoy travelling by road was turned back by Serbian police. The United Nations commander in Bosnia, General Philippe Morion, who's in Srebrenica, has promised to stay there until supplies arrive.
Not for the first time did a UN convoy leave for Srebrenica, hoping to unload aid and bring out sick and wounded. Not for the first time were they disappointed.
Turn it around, marshal it, start working your way back.
We thought we did have permission to continue on with the convoy, but obviously the word did not filter down to this particular level.
The head of UN forces had this to say from inside Srebrenica.
I will remain here to testify of this crime against humanity.
In Tuzla, where the injured will be taken, plans for their medical evacuation by air using American and other UN helicopters stalled tonight. Even though medical aid has got through to this hospital, doctors are being forced to use medicines which really they shouldn't. This sodium bicarbonate should have been used up by November 1987, this anaesthetic by October 1986.
The main trouble is antibiotics. That is the main trouble because we have, I've told you, we have 500 patients.
One of them, this young woman wounded in the head, went 11 days without medical treatment and has a 50% chance of survival. Vernon Mann, ITN, Tuzla, Bosnia.
Police in Bombay have defused 2 more bombs just 2 days after the explosions which killed 300 people. The devices were found on a motorbike left outside a railway station. As investigators search for clues, Bombay's residents have been mourning their dead.
Within seconds, a bomb on a bus had destroyed buildings and wrecked lives. Today, workmen began the painstaking task of demolishing what remains of people's homes. Those who lived here tried to salvage what little they can from the wreckage. It's not much, but it's now the sum total of their possessions.
Only our life is saved, that's all. Other thing, everything is gone. Everything is gone. We are against refugees.
The police investigation may take many months. It could be years before anyone's brought to justice. But there's no time scale for the human misery caused here. For those who've lost their homes and their relatives in this blast, the suffering will last a lifetime.
One of the passengers on the bus was 12-year-old Tejas Menta, whose family are now mourning their only son. The boy, who was a passionate cricketer, was on his way to play when he died. Tejas had been selected for India's under-16 cricket team. Now his mother is one of hundreds of women in the city trying to come to terms with an inconsolable grief. Caroline Kerr, ITN, Bombay.